Hey folks, thanks for joining me. Yes, we're live on Facebook, live broadcast. And yes, we're on Dove Baron Leadership instead of just Dove Baron. And I'm going to be trying to do a lot more of my videos from here. So if you are seeing this on Dove Baron on my Facebook page, come on over to Dove Baron Leadership. That's where most of these broadcasts are going to come from moving on. All right, so today I want to talk to you about when I moved to Australia, talk about the impotence of complaining and corporate culture and how those things tie together. And if you think I look different than the last time I did a video, I did. Somebody was saying to me about that yep, I cut my hair back off, went back to my normal look and chopped it nice and short again. And so yes, that's why it looks like this. There was no plan for the other look, it just is what happens. Anyway, let's go into it. I think I was 22. I had left the UK. I'd lived in the UK most of my life until I was 21. And then from there I moved to New Brunswick, and I was living in New Brunswick, and for me it was an amazing experience because New Brunswick was this East Coast Canada place that seemed so vastly different than the urban ghetto that I was from. It was a completely different place with a completely different mindset. Everybody was doing things differently there. It was not urban, it was green. It was, I moved there, I believe in like November, so it was really cold but beautiful and white, and the people seemed so different than the people I had been around most of my life. It didn't take me long to realize that there were a lot of similarities. Even though it appeared to be such a very different place, it was actually a very similar place in a lot of the mindset ways, and I can get into that in a minute. After I lived in New Brunswick, I initially moved to Australia before I went on my travels into Asia and Indonesia and those places, but I moved to Australia. When I first got to Australia, I moved in disaster of all disasters, but I moved in with my father. My father had already lived in Australia for many years, and I decided to move out there. He lived there with my stepmom and my two sisters. So I went out there to a place called Rockingham. Actually, it wasn't even Rockingham, it was outside of a place called Rockingham. And you know, I got to Aussie. It was a very different experience. Leaving New Brunswick and freezing cold in November, get to Australia, it's the beginning of just coming up for summer, it's beautiful weather, it's hot. Traveled across on the India Pacific railway line, beautiful railway. I thought, well, this will be great because it goes from Sydney all the way to Perth, from the East Coast all the way to the far West Coast. It's going to be fantastic. I'll get to see the country. Well, yeah, not so much. It leaves Sydney, for those of you who ever think about doing this trip, leaves Sydney in the evening, and it's a beautiful evening, and the train travels up into the Blue Mountains, and it's quite gorgeous, and you just get up there and you can hear parrots chirping, and it's pretty amazing. And then you know, the light goes down and you wake up the next morning and you're in the first sort of place in the Nullarbor. Nullarbor means no trees in the native Aboriginal Australian language. So that's pretty much what it was like for about 4 or 5 days. It was just no trees, no life, nothing, crossing these one-horse towns in this train with really nothing going on for days upon days upon days, and really didn't get to experience anything of Australia as such. It was a very different experience. But then I did land in the West, and I got to the West, and my old man picked me up at the train station, and then we went off to where he lived. And I remember sort of hanging around, noticing that my father, who was from Northern England, all the people who were around him were pretty much like him. They had the same sort of mentality. Many of them were from Northern England, and many of them complained a lot about all kinds of things. The heat, the beer wasn't as good as the UK, fish and chips weren't as good, they complained about the Aussies, and you know, you got to get that I was brand new to Australia. I didn't really know, I didn't have any sense of whether it was right or wrong, true or not. But being me, I didn't stick around there. I went off and did my sort of exploring and went into the city. I went to Perth and hung around and talked to some people and was telling somebody, I don't know who it was telling somebody about the kind of things that my father and the people around my father were saying. And the Aussies have a term for that. They said, oh, your old man or your old man's friends are all whining pums. Whining pums? What's a whining pum? Well, they're pummies. They're Brits who just whine about how things are not as good as they were back in the UK. How things are not as, like I said, the beer's not as good. There's no soccer. It's too hot. The fish and chips are not as good. I mean, just complaining about the country they were in. And I remember saying to these people that I was talking with, I will never be a whining pum. See, in my head, I understood that I had left the UK because I wanted something else. And I knew there was going to be a price to that. And part of the price was giving up whatever was comfortable. Sometimes what's comfortable sucks, by the way, but you just get comfortable with it. But I was okay with that. I knew that I had to leave behind some things. And I never, ever complained. And until I was ready to go, and then it was like, okay, it's time to leave and go somewhere else. It's fascinating to me that people will uphinge their entire lives. They will move to another country. They will pay all the money it takes. They will upheave everything, their families, their homes, everything, and move to another country and then complain about that country. Well, why did you leave the bloody country you were in? If you didn't like it, why didn't you just stay where you were? And no, you couldn't, then you don't have to complain. For me, this is a really great metaphor of what I see in organizations regarding corporate culture. We're brought in and people want to come into the corporate culture and they want to change the culture. They want to make it their culture. They want to make it the way that they think it should be, rather than understanding that when you come in to a corporate culture, that is what you buy into. You don't just buy into the company, you buy into the culture as well. You decide that you want what that company offers, and that includes the corporate culture. You don't get to change it unless you're, of course, the CEO or somebody at that top level. Now, here's the challenge with companies and organizations. Very often, they don't have a real corporate culture. They have what we call a subculture. And the subculture is one that is not what's in the handbook. This is what the culture is. It's the way that everybody just does shit and just gets away with it. And this is one of the challenges, that a company needs to have a rock solid corporate culture so that when people are coming in, they know what they're coming into. And by that, I don't just mean, oh, well, in our corporate culture, we have casual Fridays. I'm talking about what are the innate beliefs? What is it that we stand for? What is it that we deeply believe? What is it? Do we know what is non-negotiable for us? Do we know what is absolutely unacceptable in any way, shape, or form? Do we know what we will stand and fight for as an organization? Those are the things that are part of your corporate culture. And if you're not rock solid on what your corporate culture is, then there's a good chance the people coming in won't know either. Essentially better than a good chance. It's certain that they won't know either. And if they don't know, they will become whining pums. They'll become people who whine and complain about your culture. You've got to get it rock solid so that when nobody can complain, because this is what it is. Listen, folks, you came here to join us. This is what we are. You're good with that? Great. You're not good with that? Good. Move right along. Corporate culture has to be rock solid, okay? Otherwise, you have people who are just dedicated and committed to complaining. And I want you to know that complaining is completely impotent. Who cares? Who cares that you're not happy with it? Who cares that you're complaining about it? Nobody cares. Nobody gives a damn. So don't bother complaining, do something. And sometimes doing something means that you just go somewhere else. You just decide that this is not the place for you and you're going to go somewhere else. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. If that's what's good for you and you want to go somewhere else, go somewhere else. Just don't stand around and complain. It was interesting because I just got off doing a pre-interview. We just recorded an interview with my mate Jim Bouchard. You may know Jim. the Sensei Master, Sensei Leadership, fabulous guy doing great stuff. And him and I have had many political conversations, many of which we've actually put online and had some great combos about the political situation. Here's an example of leadership. Jim certainly was complaining about it, thought it was unhealthy and unhappy, and I did the same. Do you know what the difference is? Jim is running. He's running. He's running as a libertarian candidate. That's an example of not complaining, getting off your ass, doing something. Complaining is impotent. So don't complain, don't whine, decide on what you want, go for that, but understand whatever it isn't just the surface level. There's a depth, there's a culture involved. If you move to Australia for nice weather, that's great, but guess what? There's big spiders, there's crocodiles, there's all kinds of shit you might not like, including Australians. Take a look at what it is that you really want, get super clear. If you're an organization, get super clear on what your corporate culture is, what's non-negotiable, unacceptable, and what is the hill you will fight and die on. Till next time, Dov Baron, Full Monty Leadership, saying, stay curious, my friends, stay curious about the culture you're creating and the culture you're stepping into. Till next time, Dov Baron, Full Monty Leadership, stay curious, my friends.